Right, Tel.
How you doing, Steve?
I'm good, mate. Tell me about how old you were when you first started fishing Walthamstow.
I first heard about Walthamstow probably when I was around 10, 11 years of age. When I started getting into fishing with my friends who lived near me and the ones who went to my school who were into fishing, and we only fished like the docks, we fished like the park lakes in East London, and then we started hearing about this place that you could fish in close season for trout. I'd never fished for trout, but I heard about this place, and people would come down here sort of in the close season in April and so on and catch trout. And then we sort of heard there were carp in here, and that's when I started to investigate this place. So I probably never really got up here proper fishing until I was about 12, because it was a fair way to come, 2 buses and a long walk from Black Horse Road Station with your kit. So, and your sandwiches and your water and your drink or whatever you brought with you. But when I first come down here, we loved it down here. We absolutely loved it. And number one was a prolific place to get a carp. And the fish were used to show on the islands and stuff like that. And you'd see them out jumping around the islands, and you could cast as far as we could and get out to near the islands, you know, even though it's probably only about 70 yards looking back. But it was a real struggle getting out there at times. And love it down here. I've always loved it coming down here from them times. I used to come down here, 2 or 3 of us, fish out there, and we'd put bait out, and we've had some good days fishing. Some of the rigs and that we used, we never used anywhere else, you know, like because it was a bit long range fishing. And we only had soft gear and that, so we used to use short hook links and small boilies and stuff like that. But this was on the TV as well in the early 80s. There was a programme called South of Watford, which Ben Elton was a part of, and he done like a documentary of carp anglers and what they got up to and what a weird species they was of human, and they come down here. And I remember seeing it, and I was young, you know, and I was into me fishing, and I see it down here. It was Lee Jackson, Kevin Maddox and Jerry Savage, who were like the big name carp anglers down here, and that was on TV, and I remember it always stuck in my mind. Lee caught fish as well for the cameras, and you know, it was the place to come. Lots of carp anglers were down here in the early 80s.
What's your best memory over Walthamstow?
Best memory is I've got a lot of good memories of fishing over Walthamstow. So many, it's hard to distinguish, but I suppose there's the one what I've got the photo of indoors, which was probably my first carp out of here, one of my first carp out of here, and I remember catching that fish. So, and I even remember the bait I caught it on. It was a boilie, and it had Jeff Kemp had a flavouring called Fruity Tang, and it had Fruity Tang, and we used to call it FT, because in them days you had the paper, the Financial Times, we used to call it FT. There's a secret code, and we were catching on that bait, and I've got a photo at home, and on that photo I can see my nan's shopping trolley, where I'd come up here, where I'd strapped it to with the little wheels and all that, you know, and I'd come up on a bus with a shopping trolley with all my gear on it. So I think them old ones have got to be the best memories. In about 1988, 89, Pete Driscoll and Dave Pike two lads I knew from fishing Wanstead Park and Hainault Forest. They come over here on a mass baiting campaign, and they use fish meals. They put loads and loads of fish meals out, and that was probably the first time these particular reses that I'm fishing now got heavily baited like this with boilies. They'd never seen it before, because Pete and Dave I used to go with them, and we'd spend days rolling bait in his garden, in Dave Pike's garden in Gants Hill. And his dog Butch used to come along and mop some of the bait off. He was a big Staffordshire Terrier like, and we'd push him off. Anyway, we used to roll stacks and stacks of bait, and Dave used to like using loads of bait as well. And he would, I think that particular year, I don't know, I was on another lake, I was on another campaign, but I used to come and see them, and they were filling it in. The fish weren't on bait then. They weren't on bait, they weren't on boilies down here, you know. But they put so many in, they had to be in the end, you know. And that's, I think, one of the reasons over the years, it does take a while to get the fish on the bait, and then over the years they got on it, more on it and more on it. And that's one thing I like down here. They do like bait, these fish. They know what boilies are, and you know, if you can get on the fish and get a bit of bait in, they'll be happy to come and have a little scoff, you know. So that's, and I put all that down to Pete and Dave Pike's rolling sessions out the back garden all them years ago. In those days, what we used to do was always every close season, we'd all get together, a little group of us, we'd buy all our ingredients up, and we would just all have bait making days, and they were all being rolled by hand. We didn't have rolling tables, everything was being rolled by hand. Although what we did used to do, we did used to roll them out into sausages and cut them with scissors. We used to have a pair of big long sausage and a scissor, and if you had loads of time on your hand, you'd roll small baits, and if you didn't have a lot of time, you'd roll big baits. And that was about it. And then there'd be a big pot boiling it up, and places would be getting baited up. We'd be baiting places up. We'd make sure that there'd be spots rocking somewhere, so you can go and hit it. You know that you got a spot going. That was the name of the game, with baiting with boilies and sticking with areas. You know, they used to come down here. I remember it was 27 egg mix. 27 egg mix, come down here, big mix, you know, loads of really oily baits, fire it all out, and they got them going. But I tell you, I think the biggest fish they caught out of here that year was 19 pound, so that's how long ago it was. And then I come back down here again about 10 years later. I didn't fish it for a while, probably a bit less than that. I didn't fish it for quite a few years, because I was fishing in Colne Valley and Kent and places, and you know, these fish, they weren't really big enough. I was off hunting for 30s and 40s, you know.
So what was your favourite bait to use in the start?
It's a funny question, that is, because I'd say different reservoirs, I'd use different baits, and I know that sounds strange, but I find that on a lot of complexes that I've fished over the years, that if there's a complex of lakes, sometimes it don't necessarily mean they all fish the same, and generally they fish totally different. For instance, Darenth, back in the day, every one of those lakes was a totally different type of lake. It was bizarre. And the reses are a bit like that. On this particular lake that I'm on, I've done really, really well on Nutcracker, and I would never even look anywhere else in any other bait, because of the results that I've had, and you know, and what I've seen it does on here. It does catch a lot of fish. Where if I went onto the West Warwick, I'd probably be using one of my fish mills. You know, I'd probably be using a fish mill bait. But on this particular lake and Lower Maynard across the road, when I've used Nutcracker, I've done best. So you know, it does suit these two lakes. Caught some stunning looking fish down here over the years. Some of them are, you know, some real beautiful belting looking carp. But the one I caught the other week down here was just, it was unbelievable. It was such a nice fish. It was crazy. I had the most immense fight with it, it was going and going and going, you know. It was in the howling of rain. It was a real epic battle, you know, and it was one of them weird days when, you know, anything could have happened. It was a real fun. It was crazy. And when I got it in the net, it was just the scales. It was massive plates all over it. So I knew it was an original fish. You know, it ain't nothing. It was just looked so beat, like it was old, and he had a big old back on him and the width of his shoulders. And straight away I looked at it, I thought, blimey, that could be a 40, you know. It looked at it because of its back was so big. And it was just an immense carp. And when I spoke to some of the other guys down here who fish down here, and they just went, yeah, that one don't get caught very often. And you know, that's one of the best fish to catch. What an amazing looking mirror. So yeah, I've got to say, I don't think that I'm going to be beating that one too quick. Although I'm sure there's other surprises in here, but that fish is just out of this world. Another angler who's done exceptionally well on Nutcracker down here is my friend Louis. He's been using it down here for the last few years. A bit like me, reluctant to put anything different on, and he's had some amazing fish from all over the reservoirs. And he had a group of special fish this year out of the Lockwood, which is the biggest sort of day ticket reservoir on the complex. The Big Common, the Big Mirror, the next biggest fish after that as well. So, you know, it just shows you that what the Nutcracker does down here.
What's your future plans for the reservoir, Dental?
Well, if I keep coming back, I'll keep coming back onto the number 3 and the 2, mainly because of the Big Common in here. You know, there's a lovely Big Common in here, sort of low to mid 40 common in here. That's really old, really one of the oldest proper originals on here left. Big fish. I mean, when I was fishing up here in the late 90s, I had a few nice fish out of here. I had one around 36 then, and the Big Common was in here then. It was about 35, and always, even then, I was like, oh, 35 common, that's a big fish, you know, and that's still in here. So if I keep coming down here, I might as well, while that's still in here, I'll fish this one. Good friend of mine, Danny Gill, he died this year, bless him, Danny, and he fished down here for years as well, like all of us, and he caught that fish, and I remember it about mid-30s, 35, 36 years ago, and so it's one that's been on my radar now for a lot of years. You know, sometimes I think I should come down here and do a few more days than I actually do, but luckily it's still here and I can have another go for it.
Right, tell me about the fish that you caught over Walthamstow.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, the fish is it's called the Big Common. It's, you know, the one that sort of, you know, a lot of people sort of like to catch. Comes out a fair bit, to be honest, but still, it's, you know, it's one of the ones that I'd always really wanted to catch. And it came about, I mean, I've not done much fishing this year. Work's been a bit crazy, and to be fair, the reason that I probably sort of like, you know, came over here, well, certainly the reason was like a good friend of me and Terry's, like Danny Gill. He passed away in I think it was August, and we both sort of met each other, you know, at the funeral. You know, haven't really seen each other for a while, and unbeknownst to both of us, really, you know, we sort of, you know, had a chat at the funeral. He had to shoot off, so we didn't have a chance to have a proper conversation, really. But we both had the same idea, you know. Oh, you know, with Danny gone, you know, it's you think back, you know, we both sort of fished over Walthamstow Park years ago, and you know, Oller Ponds and all that, and you know, we sort of thought, you know what, go and catch a fish for Dan. That was the thinking. So I went over Oller Ponds, took a pal of mine, another good friend of Danny's, and we had one out, nothing big. Terry, I know, he went over Walthamstow Park, had a little go over there. You know, it's just with sort of Danny in mind, and then both of us, without actually sort of speaking about it, we both thought, you know what, you know, Walthamstow was another place where we'd spent time with Danny. You know, sort of quite an important water to us. So independently, you know, we sort of came over, and I didn't know Terry had been sort of putting a fair bit of bait out. He'd had a few. To say I hadn't spoken to him about it. I come over one evening and thought, right, I'm going to put a little bit of bait out, you know, sort of try and sort of, you know, catch that fish in truth, is what I said to Danny's missus. You know, Danny always said to me, you'll have it one day, because Danny had it years ago at sort of mid-30, and it's a difficult fish to target, like I say, really, because, you know, it's a sort of day-only venue, so you can't sort of pull up and put a load of bait and sort of do, you know, sessions, if you like, you know, and you might not get in the same spot the next day, that sort of thing. But it does like it down this end, down the Free. It's sort of recently sort of come out a few times in the last couple of years, sort of back down. It used to always come out here from memory, and I think it was sort of in the tea party too. It come out spend a bit of time there, but you know, more recently it was down here. So I come down. See some fizzing, some like, you know, pinprick bubbles, like definitely carp, really still. Put some bait out and thought, right, I'll come back next day, and you know, you never know. It was like that really. Next morning, got down. There was a guy fishing. I think his name was Tony in the mud bank. Popped here, got into this swim, this concrete swim, chucked the baits out. Sat down, had a cup of tea, rods on the floor, stones, all that sort of thing, and next thing, yeah, tightened up, stones popped off, lifted into it, and it was only fishing close, and it sort of didn't do too much, but it felt, you know, felt heavy. Then it sort of rolled sort of a foot or so under, big sort of golden flank, and it was like, oh, you know, could it be? You know, it was certainly a good fish, and yeah, it popped up in the net sort of straight away, didn't really give any sort of fight, and yeah, straight away I was like, that's got to be it, you know, the size of it. But you know, it's like you catch a fish and you know it's the one, but you sort of think, oh, I need someone to confirm it. So one of the bailiffs was walking past Cliff. I said, oh, Cliff, come and have a look, got it in the net, you know, what one is it? So he popped down and he was, oh, I think it might be the long common. And I was thinking, no, as much as that is probably a more coveted fish, you know, and I'd love to have caught it, you know, it was always the big common I wanted to have. And anyway, he had to shoot off, and I was like, no, it's definitely it. And yeah, got it on the mat, weighed it up, and you couldn't believe the size really, sort of 47, 14.